Fantastic. Just want to make sure the Facebook stream is working before I start talking. Alrighty. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for this fascinating conversation titled Colonialism as Disability / Disability as Colonialism. My name is Neil Daigle-Oriens, and I am the Visual Arts Manager at Real Artways. I am a bald, fair-skinned person with light blue glasses, a purple and pink beard, wearing a black floral shirt and a black pair of headphones, sitting in my basement studio with various artworks and supplies behind me. This conversation will be recorded and posted onto our YouTube channel, where we will share the link after the event so you can share it with your friends. So tonight, the format is pretty simple. Each artist will give a brief presentation on their work and then afterwards engage in a conversation together. Towards the end of the conversation, we will open the floor to questions. If you have a question and you're joining us on Zoom, please use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen at any time during the talk. And if you're joining us on Facebook, feel free to post any questions on the video post, as I will be monitoring that as well. Closed captioning is available on Zoom. To turn it on, click the CC icon located on the bottom of your screen and choose Live Transcript. Lastly, I want to offer a land acknowledgement for Real Artways. Hartford is built on the homelands of the Mohegan, Nashantucket, Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Wachusett, and Nipmuc peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Kevin Kies Bonilla, the artist who is exhibiting at Real Artways, who also organized this amazing panel, to introduce himself and lead the conversation. So go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Neil, and hello to everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And yes, thank you again to Neil and to Real Artways for providing this space for us to have this very exciting conversation. As he well mentioned, it is titled Colonialism as Disability / Disability as Colonialism. So before we start, I did wanted to make a small acknowledgement that regarding the rise in COVID cases around the world. This morning, while researching in the New York Times, I saw that it had a rise of 179% in the United States. So I just wanted to acknowledge and send a kind reminder to everyone to continue wearing your masks. And if you haven't yet, to please get vaccinated so this pandemic can end sooner rather than later. And so again, my name is Kevin Quiles Bonilla. I am a 28-year-old brown boy with curly black hair, black eyeglasses, white headphones, a navy blue shirt, and behind me is a white wall. And I'm coming to you from the ancestral land of the Lenape, also known as Manhattan. And just to give a little bit of context of the panel, I really wanted to create it and put it as part of the programming for the show because I wanted to first sort of continue building a bridge between these two lived experiences, both the lived experience of disability and the lived experience of colonialism, which are often talked about separately as separate entities of themselves. But also, I wanted to continue exploring how this colonialism can function as a disability itself that can affect both physically and mentally the bodies that inhabit that context. And for that, I wanted to bring two dear colleagues of mine whose works are really amazing and very necessary at this moment, and I believe traverse through those both intersections. So if you can unmute yourselves really quickly, just so you can say hi. So my colleagues are Alex Dolores Salerno and hi. Miguel Gonzalez.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you again so much for for being a part of this panel and of this discussion. And yeah, I'm really, really excited and looking forward to hearing about your works. So we are going to start with Alex Dolores Salerno, and I'm going to read a little bit of about Alex Dolores. So Alex Dolores Salerno is an interdisciplinary artist based in Brooklyn, New York, informed by themes of care, interdependency, and queer crip time. They work to critique standards of productivity, notions of normative embodiment, and the commodifications of rest. Salerno received their MFA in Fine Arts from Parsons School of Design and their BS in Studio Art from Skidmore College. They have exhibited at the Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation's 8th floor gallery, the Ford Foundation Gallery, Argos Center for Audiovisual Arts, among others. Their work has been featured in the New York Times and in Art in America. Recently, they have participated in Art Beyond Sight's Arts and Disability Residency from 2019 to 2020, the Interdisciplinary Art and Theory Program from 2020 to 2021, and are currently an artist in residence at the Artist Studio Program at the Museum of Arts and Design here in New York. So without further ado, I leave you with Alex Dolores Salerno.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Cool. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm Alex Dolores Salerno, and I use they, them pronouns. And I am on Lenape in Canarsie Land, also known as Brooklyn, New York. I'm a white Latinx person with short, dark brown hair, and I'm wearing an olive green button-up shirt. And behind me is a pillow and the edge of a picture frame, and also the white wall of my bedroom. So something I like to do whenever I start presenting is sharing my own access needs for virtual space. So the first thing I'll mention is that I use STEM toys. So although they might be off screen, today I am using this like black plastic interlocking piece of chain. And I'll also be reading from my notes as this is something that I do for my own access needs. And I'm feeling so grateful for this space today where we can name and discuss the ways that disability studies and disability arts are so often exclusionary of non-Western frameworks of disability. And I'm going to start by sharing a short clip from a video piece that I made last summer, and it's titled El Dios Acostado. And then I'll transition into showing my process from my most recent sculptural work. And the clip is only 1 minute long, but the full 11-minute video can be found on my website. And just to give a visual description, on the screen is my partner Echo resting on his side in a field of grass. And he's underneath a bright white sky. And he faces away from the camera and towards green bushes and trees, which frames a mountain that my mother, who's the narrator, will describe. And all of the audio is spoken twice, in English and Spanish, and with a doubling of captions, both as accessibility, but also intentionally done to set the work to a slow and restful pace.
Hey, Alex, can you stop sharing your screen, then reshare it? I think you shared without audio.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah, so you just gotta hit optimize for video when you share screen.
El Cerro Mandango es una montaña que a simple vista simula a un hombre acostado, custodiando sigilosamente la seguridad y armonía del valle sagrado de la longevidad llamado Vilcabamba. Este cerro es conocido como el Dios acostado. At first glance, the Mandango Mountain resembles a sleeping man, carefully guarding the harmony of the sacred valley of longevity called Vilcabamba. This mountain is known as the sleeping god.
So the first step of this work was to take a nap alongside Mandango, which translates to the El Dios Acostado, which then translates to the sleeping god. And it's located in Vilcabamba in southern Ecuador, which is once a place to heal and rest during travels. And Vilcabamba translates in Quechua to Sacred Valley, and has also been referred to as the playground of the Inca. And I first became interested in the town of Vilcabamba and its mountain Mandango for several reasons. and the first being stories that my mother had told me from her experience as a child. In the 70s, scientists from the US and Europe came to investigate the high percentage of people in the area who lived to be over 100 years old. And they also spent time in nearby towns, one of which was my mother's hometown, where she met and was asked to take care of these researchers as a child. As a result of the studies that were published in places such as National Geographic, Vilcabamba became popularized as the Valley of Longevity, despite having a history as a place of rest. When I first visited Vilcabamba several years ago, it was extremely clear the ways that the prospect of longevity had changed the culture and environment of the town and attracted people looking for adventure without integrating with the locals. Some of the ways here that colonialism is inherently tied to disability is through the consequence of the displacement of local people and the devaluing of ancestral knowledge and rest itself. Prior to this video, I've been working with bedding materials, such as bed frames, memory foam, and pillowcases to explore and critique standards of productivity and the commodification of rest. Along with rest comes a consideration of how we understand time. Because of my own physical and mental conditions, along with the difficulty I have finding accessible, sustainable work and navigating capitalist constructs of time, I often run on what is referred to as crib time. This could refer to the need for an accessible pacing of time and the ways our bodies and minds may be in conflict with the capitalist constructs and demands for productivity and how long things are supposed to take or how we should be spending our time. And I want to think about the way we conceptualize time itself as an imposed colonial construct rather than something natural. And as I think about my relationship to time and work culture, particularly in the US, and the process of reconnecting with my Ecuadorian roots and the land my family has cared for generations, I had to think about coffee. On the screen is an image of the tops of large coffee plants with tons of small green fruit under a bright blue sky. These plants are my uncle's plants that he grows and takes care of. It wasn't until recently that I realized just how enormous the coffee industry is, and that coffee is one of the world's most traded commodities. I also see coffee as having become a symbol of work culture that typically goes unquestioned. Here is a process image from a recently finished work. On a white desk, coffee beans are placed in dozens of pairs. In front is a spool of red thread. Coffee beans have been glued together like beads on a necklace, extending from the spool. The continuous thread with hundreds of beans continues off the screen. During the beginning of the pandemic, I had the impulse to begin doing this almost baffling process of stringing coffee beans onto a thread. And at first I thought I would create some type of ornament or wearable object, but the thread just kept going and going. And I have a very different process with each project, but this work was surprising to me and began really instinctively. And it continued to reveal itself to me as it progressed over several months. Bit by bit, I wrapped the thread of beans around an industrial spool called a cable reel, which is used for electrical wires. And then I placed the work onto a motorized turntable that continuously rotates slowly, reminiscent of a product display that we might see while shopping. The left image on the screen shows my first layer of coffee beans making its way up the spool. And the right image shows the cylindrical middle of the spool fully covered by the coffee beans with the second layer nearly done. And here's a really quick video clip shot from the studio of the work on a white pedestal to show it rotating on the turntable. On the screen is an image of the final work on a white pedestal against the white wall and dense with coffee beans as I wrapped the beans around the cable reel 3 times to create a density to the layers. On the side of the image, it's written that it's 20 by 16 by 16 inches. And I've decided to title it Extra here, which is Latin for to drag out or pull or draw forth or draw out, extract or remove. And I think it sounds closest to extract, but I also like how extra here sounds, not even knowing its Latin meaning, since capitalism, even and perhaps especially during the pandemic, demands us to be here, ready to work, extra, more than what our bodies are able to handle. And the rapid growth of coffee consumption in the US and Europe resulted in the rapid growth of coffee production in the Caribbean, Central and South America, and particularly Brazil in the second half of the 19th century. Indigenous people were displaced and exploited from the expansion of coffee production, which was done through the labor of enslaved African people and later on immigrant labor. And right now, it's predicted that Brazil will lose more than 25% of its suitable land for cultivating coffee by 2050 due to the climate crisis and deforestation. And it's happening in other places as well, like Colombia, where coffee is starting to only grow higher and higher up the mountains. How we grow coffee, among other crops, is largely grown through colonial systems of monoculture or the large-scale farming of single types of crops, rather than methods that sustain healthy ecosystems. Imposed colonial ideas of agriculture has and continues to have devastating effects. Coffee, grown in the shade, among other crops and vegetation, promotes biodiversity, while monocultural systems grown in the direct sun creates issues of erosion and mudslides, plant diseases, poor soil health, deforestation, and increased dependence on fertilizers and other chemicals, which results in runoff into the local waters. So it's essential to value the work, health, and food security of small-scale producers and local people. Extra here considers the way colonialism and global capitalism's extraction of resources and demand to always be productive hides behind narratives of coffee as social currency and the work culture hospitality. Rejecting the idea of coffee as fuel for work, my process of spending time with thousands of coffee beans, one by one, was a lot of labor, but it was also a way for me to slow down, working very carefully for hours each day, which became both an act of meditation and of stimming, which is short for self-stimulatory behavior, which is a common trait among neurodiverse people like myself. While the demand for hard work is all around us, through tools I've learned from peers, mentors, and ancestors involved in disability justice, I can begin to unlearn the ways when white supremacy has devalued rest and argue for slowness and the reframing of time itself as an excess need. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a generous work. You know, I think we've already spoken before a little bit about El Dios Acostado, but aside of, tackling, the issues of disability and colonialism within the context of South America, I also really love, the personal side of the work, where you're also honoring your heritage, and also an honoring of your mother's culture, but to migrate to the United States. So it's also like, and not just an honoring of her culture, but also you coming into contact with and embracing that culture as well. So thank you so much for presenting these two projects with us.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Alrighty, and so now we're gonna continue on with Miguel González Cordero, and I'm gonna read a small bio. So Miguel González Cordero is an interdisciplinary artist from Vega Baja, Puerto Rico. In 2016, Miguel González received his BA in Visual Arts from the Universidad del Sagrado Corazón in Santurce, Puerto Rico. In 2014, he held his first solo exhibition, Danza Coralina, at the José Pepín Méndez Gallery within the Universidad del Sagrado Corazón. González Cordero has participated in group exhibitions such as Disloque at Área Lugar de Proyectos in Caguas, Puerto Rico, Video Voces Boricua at 350 Espacio Cultural in Chiapas, México, Exploración Corpórea, Formas y Movimiento at Diagonal, and 2525 at the art gallery of the Universidad del Sagrado Corazón, both in Santurce, Puerto Rico. He's currently studying a bachelor's degree in graphic design at the School of Design and Architecture of the Ana Jiménez University, Gurabo Campus in Puerto Rico. So without further ado, I leave you with Miguel González. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Kevin, for that introduction. As he said, my name is Miguel González Cordero. I'm an artist from the island of the Taíno. Visual description is behind me, there's a white wall, a white curtain. I am a white Latino in my 20s, black hair, a black beard, and I am wearing a dark blue shirt with stripes pink, white, and yellow. And first of all, I would like to thank Kevin for the invite to this conversation about disability and colonialism. Before I start to talk about my work, I've been in the process of developing. Would like to mention that they are a part of the Blue Parking Project. This is a project that's based in the platform of Instagram, which I decide to project ways to explore, respond, and expose and document interdisciplinary work from the start point of a plus-size Latino wheelchair user. Let me share my screen. Okay. 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 Can everyone see the screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's better. So before I start with this work, a series of work called Untitled Memory, I would like to say a couple of words. Everyday objects hold a memory that manifests as a reminder of who I am to society and to myself attached to them. Now I'm going to say it in Spanish. Los objetos cotidianos sostienen una memoria que se manifiesta como recordatorios que tiene quién soy para la sociedad y para mí mismo adjunto a ellos. So I'm going to read a little something that I wrote about this work. During quarantine, I started to reflect on my physical and psychological relationship with the artifacts that are part of my immediate daily life. I started questioning what is their meaning to me and my body. I was asking myself, what is my correlation with them as a human and as a disabled person? I was curious about the emotional and psychological feelings that are attached to these common use objects. This link and the objects are manifested in printed phrases or words using a script type font designed by me based on my own handwriting. This ongoing series of work is the result of this connection between memory, triggers, time, and the common ready-made object. I think it is important to talk about what quarantine can be for a disabled person, even though for some people with disability, quarantine is just another day in their lives. For many different reasons. I want the work to occupy common public and common private spaces where disabled bodies feel that they are sometimes welcome, but mostly unwelcome. Always knowing and keeping in mind that these words do not replace me, us, or we. Disabled bodies should and have to coexist outside and beyond of the labels and roles imposed by a society and the system created with ableism that manifests itself in microaggression, inspiration porn, and other things. These are works in which no shape or form can be taken as a general rule in the context of colonialism and disability. If you do that, It sounds just like another form of ableism. They are personal interrogations, reflections, and reactions. It does not devalue others' disabled life experience. The work intends to question the relationship of society as in structure of cultural, economic, political, and educational with human bodies that just happen to be disabled. So now I'm going to talk about the work. Um, okay, so this first piece, I'm going to start with a visual description. It's a digital mock-up of a floor piece Untitled 2021, a black rectangular welcome mat. The mat has in the center white uppercase letter words in Spanish that says bienvenido, which in Spanish is a gender neutral way of writing welcome. Underneath that has a sentence in white letters that say disculpa cualquier inaccesibilidad arquitectónica u otra a continuación, which translates to excuse any architectural inaccessibility or others from this moment on. So basically, this piece is an intentional want to talk about it first because it welcomes everybody into a space. Everyone watching, everybody listening to this conversation. It is a welcoming statement about how public places are regulated and designed regarding accessibility. In a way, wherever this piece is, it's a disclaimer to the disability community, a disclaimer that we, or at least I, am tired of hearing. Welcome, but we are sorry, ... It makes us feel unwelcomed in social spaces where we as a community deserve to coexist. The next piece, this image description is digital mock-up of a floor piece Untitled 2021, a black rectangular rug with black stitching along the border. The rug has in the lower half a sentence in white letters that say, esta alfombra hace que este espacio sea menos accesible, which translates to, this rug makes this space less accessible. Okay, so now that we have entered this space, as a disabled person in a wheelchair, you find yourself a common object, the rug. With this piece, I want to give space to voice and accessibility housing and public spaces from a point of view from architecture to how and where things are placed in an interactive public or private area or space. The next piece is a image description, a digital mock-up of a floor piece Untitled 2021, a black rectangular shaped foam yoga mat. The mat has in the center white upper letter words that in Spanish say, has intentado hacer yoga, which means, and have you tried doing yoga? This piece in particular talks about the medical situation regarding healthcare system side of disability. The length that people in and out of the medical field will go with people with disability. When you have a visible disability, suddenly everyone is a healthcare expert. And the other hand, it speaks about how, for example, medical plans give and provide services for disability people. In this side, there is two pieces that are accompanied by both of them. That is part of an installation. And the first visual description is digital mock-up of an installation piece Untitled 2021, two black rectangular shaped pillows with wrinkles around the edges. The pillow has in the center a sentence in white letters. The sentence says, 80% of the people with your condition pass away sleeping, which translates in Spanish to, el 80% de las personas con tu condición fallecen durmiendo. Now on the right side of the slide, there is another image that is described as digital mock-up, part of an installation Untitled 2021, A black square-shaped pillow with wrinkles around the edge. The pillow has in the center a sentence with white letters that say 80% of the people with your condition pass away sleeping, sorry, which translates in Spanish to el 80% de las personas con tu condición fallecen en el durmiendo. This piece in particular continues to talk about the health care system side of disability. It explores the idea of triggers more than the rest of the work. It is based on a medical experience, which is a doctor's appointment where I was told that as a person with disability and a person that lives with espina bífida and hydrocephalia, that was said to me by the doctor. And it's something that shapes me as a human, shapes me as an artist. And the last piece, image description, is a digital mock-up Untitled 2021. It is the backside of an iPhone SE plastic phone cover with rounded edges. The phone cover has in the lower center part of white lettered words that say nota personal. Underneath has a sentence in smaller white letters that say acuérdate a llamar a ver si tienen acceso para el silla de ruedas, which translates in English to personal note, numbers to call to see if they have wheelchair access. This common rubber object is a visual and physical representation of a part of our constant social life, things as disabled people have to take into consideration in social areas. As a reminder that you have to know beforehand, will we be welcomed in this or that place? And that is all.
Wow, thank you so much. I kept wanting to like snap my fingers. I was like, yes, that was amazing. Thank you so much for presenting this very, very powerful and necessary work, Miguel. I have to say I'm very happy that work like this is been made in Puerto Rico specifically. As both of you know, I have a sister, Keishla, who was born with muscular dystrophy. And so her, my mother, and I, we were always together. And so we had a very specific lived experience, you know, and all of the language that you presented it's language that I've been used to because of the experiences, you know, living with my sister, you know, making sure in advance if a place has accessibility, this notion of welcome and unwelcoming, you know, that you talked about in the beginning. And also the idea of the pillow, you know, which has, you know, often is like a space of resting and then having this very intense and very direct language, you know, it's very
It's designed to
just
be
very
a calming place. It's designed to be a calming place, but to other people with disability, it might mean something else, which in that case, that's what it is for me.
right. Right, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you so much for presenting this new perspective to us.
Thank you.
Alrighty, and then last but not least is me. So I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. Okay, so can you all see this? Alrighty. So this is one of the works that are featured on the show that's titled As the Palm is Bent, the Boys Incline. This specific work is titled Untitled, Exposure Therapy Documentation. The work was made between 2002 and 2021. Two photographs are hanged to the wall next to each other in black frames. Both images are of myself as a 10-year-old. I'm wearing my school uniform, a light blue shirt and navy blue pants. On the left photograph, I'm in my childhood home restroom. I'm staring into the camera while I'm flushing the toilet. On the right photograph, a closer shot of me looking into the camera while touching the light switch in my bedroom. These photographs are part of a documentation for my former psychology psychologist during my first treatment for obsessive compulsive disorder back in 2002. These photographs were meant to serve as proof that the exposure therapy made an improvement on my daily routine. I'm touching a light switch in my bedroom and the toilet's flush lever, which I would have avoided before, as they were triggers for an incessant hand washing process. So around 10 years old was when I was beginning to present with different symptoms or actions that were related to this condition, obsessive compulsive disorder. And it was the first of a few times throughout my lifetime where I have received psychological help. And so it was really interesting to me when I re-stumbled upon these photographs of last winter, because it reminded me of this very specific project that was made by my former psychologist in order to sort of prove that the exposure therapy had worked. And it was for my mom was asked to photograph myself touching these spaces that I would generally have avoided because of it would trigger an anxiety attack, or it would trigger, as I mentioned, a process of hand washing that could last for a really long time. And so I decided to present it on the show because it went very in line with the larger discussions that I was talking about, specifically with the notion of photography. And it's the idea of veracity in photography, which is something that has been talked about since the very inception of photography. Throughout the show, I was very interested in talking about it from the context of Puerto Rico, specifically during the 19th century, when many of the photographs that were taken of Puerto Rican people were by either European photographers or US photographers that would come from the outside in to create this very specific and very this very specific frame of who the Puerto Rican was. And ultimately, it became a tool of otherizing and in many ways, another form of colonialism. So I wanted to sort of continue expanding that notion around what is real in photography within this very personal context of this photographs that were taken with a very specific task, which was essentially to prove that the exposure therapy that I had been working on for months and months was successful. So this is a closer detail of the left photograph. And then this is a closer look at the right photograph. And yeah, that's it for me. So I am gonna unshare my screen. I'm gonna ask both Alex and Miguel to unmute themselves so we can start a little discussion. Hi again, thank you so much. So I had a few questions that I wanted to just for all of us to talk about, you know, in general informal conversation. So the first one is thinking a lot about intersections, you know, even though this specific panel is focused on colonialism and disability, you know, all of us inhabit many identities and many intersections, you know. We're not only Latinx, we're not only disabled, we're not only queer in my case, for example, you know, all of these identities are within us and they function at the same time. So my first question was, which is something that I also like ask myself constantly in my work, but I really wanted to know your point of view, is how do you mediate the intersections that you inhabit within the frames of your own practices?
I can go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin, for that question. Yeah, I really like, hold on, let me pull up. Yeah, sorry. I really like this question a lot because it makes me think back to grad school, which was a time where I feel like I was really trying to figure this out. And at the start of grad school in 2016, I was doing work that mostly focused on my identity as a trans non-binary person. And because this was an identity that I was still beginning to explore and to figure out for myself, and also in relation to my new life in New York City. And at that time, I had a whole lot of anxiety about how I was representing my identity and in my work. And I became kind of overly conscious about what I was referring to as like transparency and opacity, or illegibility and legibility, and especially in a world that demands those with non-normative identities to constantly explain and justify ourselves and give proof. And I still find power in using opacity in my work and maintaining a level of illegibility. But I think my younger self from several years ago was kind of afraid. And I was afraid to kind of play into stereotypes or give too much power to a cis gaze or the non-transgender gaze. And I was also afraid of being pigeonholed and unable to bring my other identities into the conversation if my work was revolving primarily around gender. And now my work has, in a lot of ways, done a 180. And while it isn't so obviously identity-based, it also will always be identity-based for me, since for me, it's an amalgamation of my experiences along with wisdom and lessons I've learned from others. And in a lot of ways, I think the issue of being pigeonholed hasn't gone away and might not go away, since the art world is in some ways set up to lock artists into one conversation or one framework, because that's easy and it's legible and it's profitable. But something that's given me a lot of comfort is knowing that disability justice is also means critiquing society's standards of how bodies should look, how they should function, and also the language that we use for ourselves. So when I'm thinking about how I experience capitalist demands for productivity in my practice and thinking critically about ideas and practices of care, I'm trying to speak from my intersection as a whole and embrace all parts of me, because of this forever journey of unlearning that disability takes me on, or disability justice takes me on.
Absolutely, thank you. No, I really love when you mentioned this idea of proof, or of, you know, this idea that our works need to represent this very specific identity, and it needs to be as though we are already know every single detail about the identities that we inhabit, you know, and I love that through, as you mentioned, through disability justice, you know, there's this notion that you know, that we're still, even though we're creating work, we're still in the process of also unlearning and understanding how all of these intersections interact with each other, you know. And I think, yeah, I think in many ways, you know, with the exhibition, you know, I think that there's always this expectation, you know, of this needs to be totally resolved, it needs to be finished. And when I was putting the show together, I was thinking of this, I was trying not to think of it so much as a conclusion of this is my ideas around this topic and that's it, but rather leaving it as open-ended questions, you know, that will continue on being answered. And
I really love how your photographs, and especially in relation to the other work in the show, it really like kind of highlights that demand for proof, this colonial demand to then categorize in this way. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and I also remember, you know, our conversations in past panels around this idea of photography and how it has become another layer of colonialism, you know, in many ways, and not just in Puerto Rico, but in the global South in general. Miguel, do you have any thoughts around this question?
So in my practice as an artist and my day-to-day life collide in the sense that my work is autobiographical. It talks about who I am, what I am, and where I am in terms of context, space, and time. It also is a result of a constant cycle of living, perceiving, and reacting to many ways ableism is manifested day or night. So I consider this work it talks about where I am in context of as a customer in the supermarket, as a person that just simply goes to the movies, goes to the beach. I get different reactions depending of the environment and the context. So I also try to impose that and expose it as a part of my work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, as I mentioned earlier, it's an experience. Obviously, I haven't had it at first from first person, but definitely, as being someone that has always been next to my sister and have always been experiencing that constant negotiation that people with disabilities has to, and the labor essentially that people with disabilities have to go with physical disabilities more so have to go through. Just in everyday tasks, such as you mentioned, like going to the supermarket, going to the movies, having to make sure that this location that we're going to has accessibility, making sure that the space welcomes people with disabilities, so yeah, thank you. And then my next question, which again is something that I keep asking myself, but I would really love to know your thoughts around this, is how can we continue sort of shedding lights on the connections and the parallels between disability and colonialism? Because I really wanted to ask that because, again, going to the beginning, I think that these are often themes that are talked about very separately. Either we're talking about disability or either we're talking about colonialism, and both, again, are intersections that coincide with each other, and we inhabit them at the same time. So yeah, how do you think we could continue creating these parallels and continuing this conversation around these themes?
So I'll go first. I think I can continue shedding light about disability and colonialism just by simply existing in public spaces and private spaces as an artist, creating a moment to stop and think for society in general, disabled and non-disabled. As all of this is a way of demanding space and taking it all in all types of contexts, even in recreational environments where disability is not a part of normally. Also, by knowing that being disabled does not stop me from sometimes being a negative result of a system and its ableism in my work, words, or actions.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I love that first. Yeah, that initial just existing in this space. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Thank you so much. Oh, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Oops, okay.
No worries.
I think I like this question because I think we can begin to do this through, I was thinking about how disability justice has always been an intersectional movement and kind of thinking about the legacy of the movement. And I think we can, simultaneously celebrate the abundance of joy and knowledge and culture and expansiveness within our disability communities, but also while confronting the production of impairment produced through war, violence, and theft of land and resources. So sometimes the definitions of ableism I find can be very simplistic. And these definitions of ableism they're lacking if they don't include anti-Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. And I also think it's important to be conscious of who gets to identify as disabled. It's a huge privilege for me to be able to easily identify as disabled. And that doesn't mean that my experience as an autistic person with chronic pain is less disabled or significant, but for a lot of people of color and folks without access to certain language and conversations, disability as both an identity and community is not equally accessible to everybody. And calling self-disabled might even in some situations be dangerous. So how we understand disability is also a product of colonialism and capitalism. So disability has always been a part of human diversity forever, and there's always been a valued place for disability, and people understood the roles and values of varying capacities and ways of being in the world, and including how we experience our genders. And colonized people were viewed by the colonizer as disabled, and this was used to justify enslavement and genocide. And for the colonizer, being able-bodied was inherently linked to race and heteronormativity and productivity. So the violence of colonial ideas of value and power structures and categorization, and the demand for able-bodied minds to that look and function in certain ways, extends to how disability is so often defined in relation to work and what bodies produce value.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you. Also, thank you so much for bringing this notion of privilege, you know, because I think it's something that I also, as a neurodivergent, you know, as having a neurodivergent disability myself as well, you know, I often sort of, yeah, it's something that for a really long time, for many years, I have battled with myself. You know, I never, for a really long time, I didn't acknowledge my identity as a person with a disability, because the knowledge that I had was the experience living with my sister who had a physical disability. So it's this constant negotiation, you know, and to sort of, and again, as you mentioned, learning and unlearning. So yeah, so thank you so much for bringing that topic into this discussion. And yeah, thank you so much to both. So I'm gonna ask Neil to come back to see if there's any questions from the viewers. Yeah, hi.
Well, hello again. We do have a few questions. They're a bit specific. So I have my own question that I'm going to be selfish and throw in there first. That's a bit more general. And then we can get into specifics. But something I noticed about all of your work is there's an element of repetition. With Alex's work, not only the audio of the video, the repetition in English and in Spanish, and then the repetition of the captions again, the coffee beans. You didn't present it, but I'm familiar with your work involving pillowcases as well. Kevin, the actual experience of having to repeatedly touch things in order as part of your therapy. And Miguel, I was thinking about the ready-made as a very repetitive object, as an object that can be just mass produced. I was wondering if you could all kind of speak about how that plays a role in your work, if it plays a role, or if this is just a fun little coincidence that I'm noticing.
I like this coincidence. It's that, yeah, this for me makes me think about, I guess the repetition of objects, I guess, are a lot of, especially with the pillowcase work, it's like objects that are all around me, and something, I think this probably happens because of kind of how I view art making. And this is something that I've learned from other disabled artists in my life, is that often I think a lot of the time we think about art making as like we go in the studio and then we leave the studio in the moments where like we're directly working with materials in our hands. But the way I kind of think about it for my own practice is that for me, the art making is just living life. So it's all part of the practice. So I think of just like my daily life as part of the practice. And so, and I think because of that, because the labor of the art practice is living life, then the objects that I use or that are all around me end up showing up in my work. And so then there becomes that repetition of the things that are kind of that support me, and yeah.
Yeah, I would add in terms of my own practice. Yeah, I think repetition is something that has been ongoing, especially on the show. You know, there's like the posters, and then the silk screen prints. You know, it's something that where repetition is constantly explored, and it's definitely linked to that experience of repetition as a type of compulsion. You know, which is something that I experienced for many years. You know, so it's something that. Again, coming into this idea of how to mediate, you know, because the work, I think all of my work in many ways has this very implicit notions of sort of my lived experience through OCD. So now, like my next sort of task, I guess would say, would be sort of how to make those themes and those different actions to sort of be more explicit within the work.
I think in my particular case, I think that ready-made objects are the most efficient way of transmitting the message in regards to what is this object, the person recognizing the object, and what does it mean to me, and how do I convey that? And I liked it that you can recognize the object and it could be part of the daily life, which is what disabled people want to be, just part of the daily life in any context. But it does not replace disabled people. The items do not replace them.
Awesome. Thank you for your responses to that. I think it's such an interesting little connection that happened because all three of you kind of approach object making and art making in such different ways. But this kind of theme of repetition popping up, I think is really interesting and something maybe worth exploring in the future. Not by me, obviously, but by somebody else. I do have a question aimed at Alex from Arealis, and I'm sorry if I said your name incorrectly, but they say, how was the dynamic between you and your mom to create that work about that area of Ecuador? How was she part of the process?
I love that question. I could talk a lot and I could go on and on about that. How should I, long story short, it was oh wow, that's like such a big question for me because it was such a important and vulnerable and like tender, difficult, but also like very natural process because it would also mean that it was also, I guess, it's not always easy, I think, to let our parents into our art practices when our art practices are so like personal and vulnerable, and especially when they're so directly related to our identity and lived experience. So there was a lot of that wrapped up into bringing my mom into my work and kind of then, you know, teaching her like, this is why I'm doing this, and this is why I'm doing image description, and everything is repeated twice. But it was a really wonderful moment. I found it was interesting because I would, my mom helped me a lot with the translations, but when she gave me the translations back, she edited them to make it her own thing. So they weren't actually translations. She just ended up writing her own thing, which because she's a poet. So, and honestly, this whole process has just made me want to kind of even work more directly with my mom, not just through like her voice and translating, but I'm planning another video with my mom where I hopefully can use her own poetry in a video work. And it can be even more collaborative in that way. But yeah, this is just a fun question. Thank you.
Kevin, you've also collaborated with your mother.
Yes. Yeah.
Just, I feel like this is a good segue to just kind of talk about that for a moment.
No, yeah, definitely is. As Alex mentioned, it's a very, very leisured experience, you know, just yeah, and I think in my case, you know, I was also thinking of distance, you know, also like how she is still in Puerto Rico, I am in the mainland, you know, and so I used her voice and I lip synced to her voice, which also became a very emotional and very yeah, a very emotional piece for me, you know, because of the distance that we already experienced. And but yeah, no, I was really interested in this idea of lip syncing, but familiar voices, you know, as this way of like honoring this specific lineage that we inhabit. So yeah, a very layered experience, but yeah, really positive, and yeah, it definitely made me want to continue expanding those projects.
And out of curiosity, I just have to ask, Miguel, have you ever collaborated with any of your family?
I don't think I have. No, I don't.
Well, now you know what your next project is going to be. We don't have any more questions, but I do have what appears to be a comment from Echo, Echo Mis Amores. And they say, thinking about Sins Invalid poster by Micah Bazant, that was a message of solidarity between disabled artists in San Francisco with Palestinians getting physically disabled by war and bombs funded by the US and Israel. Thinking also about the social model of disability with these thoughts and how disabling society under colonialism and capitalism are themselves disabling. So I guess the question there is just kind of reactions to those ideas of very real colonialism, very and contemporary colonialism as a part of this conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you, Echo, for those reference. And I think it goes back to, yeah, that thing that I'm still myself asking, how to sort of continue this conversation about how does colonialism work itself as a type of disability, you know, that's very specific within a very specific context, and it affects a very specific group of people. So yeah, it's again, I think of it as this open-ended question that I probably will not have the answer in the near future, but it's something that will continue on, and it won't be just my own findings, it will be the finding of an entire community.
Thank you, Echo, for this. I think it's so crucial that when these conversations we mention the like impairment and debility that war produces. And yeah, I think it's important to also think about kind of colonialism as like this force that like wears down populations over time through the production of disability.
And with that, I guess, are there any final thoughts to share tonight before signing off? I do want to note that I did put links to all the artists' projects, their websites, as well as Instagrams on both the chat for the Zoom and on our Facebook post for this video. But if there's anything else y'all want to share before we sign off, this is a good time for that.
Well, I do wanted to share two things. So first, just wanted to share in general that the exhibition, As the Poem Has Been, The Voice and Climb, was extended for an extra week. So it'll be on view until July 31st.
Let me just
correct?
delete that line from my final paragraph. Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to do it. I needed to make that. Yeah, I was really excited about it. But then also, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Alex, but I really also want to wish Alex a happy birthday. And thank you so much for taking part of your day to be a part of this panel.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is really the best birthday gift ever.
And yeah, thank you so much for spending this hour here with us.
Alrighty, echoing that, thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. And of course, thank you, Kevin, Alex, and Miguel for sharing your work and your thoughts with us tonight. It was a wonderful conversation. Kevin, you have something else?
Sorry, no, I saw one question. Please feel happy, like if you would like to continue the conversation, please feel free to reach out to us via our social media and we can continue on the conversation.
Sorry, I'm just now seeing that too.
No worries.
But unfortunately, we are out of time for the evening. But yes, as Kevin said, reach out to folks and all that fun stuff. But again, thank you all for coming tonight. As Kevin said, his solo exhibition is on view now through Saturday, July 31st. So if you can come to Hartford, please come by and see his work. Our galleries are open and free to the public Wednesdays through Sundays from noon to 9 p.m. His exhibition was supported in part by awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Andy Warhol Foundation, and the Edward C. and Ann T. Roberts Foundation. This event in particular was supported in part from an award from the National Performance Network. We thank them all very much for helping us create this work during these really trying times. Echoing Kevin's earlier mention of COVID increasing, it's wonderful that these digital tools have kind of come up and allow us to continue connecting with each other. Thinking about not only it's wonderful we could have Miguel participate in this being in Vega Baja, but also folks who are in the area who could come to an in-person event, but are otherwise still kind of stuck at home due to various reasons. It's wonderful that we have these tools that we can still do this and connect these folks together. I also want to invite you to watch the video performance. There's a Rumble Beneath the Tarp, also supported by the National Performance Network. That is on view in our video gallery daily, as well as online on our YouTube channel. Again, thank you all so much for coming and hanging out with us tonight. And thank you to the artists for sharing. And with that, I bid you a wonderful evening. Stay safe out there. And stay hydrated. I don't think people say stay hydrated enough, but
That's
definitely
true.
stay hydrated.
Yes.
Got
Thank
my
you
water.
so much, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Neil. Thank
you.
you, Alex. And thank you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Bye, folks.